Hello everybody, this is Fernando for the latest Cryptids and Monsters Encounters video. Well, I found this weird experience that occurred to this user just the other day and I thought I would showcase it here. It has to do with something that they found or they encountered that was about 10 feet tall, covered in reddish brownish hair, and it doesn't look like there's much else to go by. So I wanted to present it here and then see if anyone else can help guess essentially what this is. I think it's actually more on the lines of an average Bigfoot, but who knows? Maybe someone else might have a different comment, something else as far as another cryptid to showcase. But it comes from the reddit.com website. They're from the subreddit Humanoid Encounters, and it's from a user called Call Me Cupid X. They titled theirs as one of my many experiences. Gives you an idea essentially of how often this family or this person had when it comes to these type of encounters. So let's go ahead and let's showcase that experience here, and then I'll give my own thoughts and opinions on it afterward. So here's what they mentioned. I'm a fairly young person, but in my life I've had a few experiences of my own, and I also have some stories of my family's experiences. I can share them all with time, but today I'll be sharing my experience with something I can only describe as troll-like. It was around 2015 when this happened. It was 10 p.m. and I was walking home from my grandparents' house to my house. My house was directly in front of my grandparents' house at the time, maybe not even 20 feet apart. My grandma was on the porch saying goodbye after we had talked for a bit, and I started walking down the steps, and that's when I heard a very strange sound. I've never found proper words to describe the sound. Closest I can get is horse hooves on a window. It sent shivers down my spine. My grandma played it off, so I continued walking. At this point, she had gone back into the house. And so I was halfway home when I looked down the yard, and at the end of my grandparents' house stood a tall, hairy humanoid creature. It was about 10 feet tall. It was huge and covered in reddish brownish hair. It resembled a human in shape and features, but it just wasn't human. It started walking towards me, and so I couldn't move, and it only walked maybe 6 feet before stopping. I just stared at it, and it stared at me. It wasn't moving, so I ran towards my house as fast as I could. When I got on my porch, I looked back, and it had started walking back to the end of my grandparents' house again. A few nights later, my mom was watching me walk to my grandparents' house. I didn't see anything and got there safely. My mom told me that she saw the same thing at the end of my grandparents' house. She said it was just standing outside of my uncle's window. It looked at her and she looked at it, but it didn't move from its spot. She described it the same ways that I did. And so we researched things together, but never found anything like it. After that, maybe 2 or 3 days go by, and my dad was outside at around 9 p.m. He was making sure he had locked the car, and when he was out there, he saw it standing under a motion light we had set in the yard between our houses. He also described it in the same way. He said it didn't acknowledge him, but he quickly went back inside. The day after that, my uncle left, and for the rest of our years living there, we didn't see it again. My uncle's room was at the end of my grandparents' house. He's not a good person, and there are a few other stories about things like this when he was around, plus his own story. My parents and I are sure it was there because of him, but it's still so creepy to think about it. I've never found any creature resembling this since. I'm sorry if my description of it is bad. I'm not sure how to describe it. I just stumbled across this sub and decided to post my story. If anyone has any similar stories, I'd love to hear them, and if you have any ideas, I'd love to know. I've always been a believer. My family has too, and I have lots of stories to tell. So if you like more, I'd be glad to share. This world is a mysterious place. Then that's it. That's everything that the user Call Me Cupid X mentioned in their encounter. So let's go ahead and let's talk about that here. For starters, what do you guys and gals think? What was this thing? There's a little twist that got me thinking about something else afterward, but here's essentially what they stated. Again, they described it as being something that was 10 foot tall. It was considered very huge, and it had reddish brownish hair, and then it was human in shape, and it had some similar human-like features, but as the user described it, it just wasn't human. And then the sound that it made sounded like it was something along the lines of a hoof, like a horse hoof that was going onto a window. So that's essentially everything that the user had, and it was corroborated by both the mother and then also the father of the user, who both stated that they saw the very same thing and that they in turn described it exactly just as the user did. And then in some situations, like in this case with the user and the mother, this creature acknowledged them when they were staring at it, but in the case of the father, it wasn't acknowledging that father, even though the father was just looking straight at it. But then the twist was this, because I was thinking it was going to be more on the lines of your average Bigfoot. I wish that the user had posted something along the lines of a description of the location. I'm wondering now if that's something involving Reddit, because it seems like Reddit, maybe they have it there as a warning or some other advice up front whenever you post a story to not mention your location, because it sure does seem like so many of these stories just don't have an exact location. Like, why not mention the city? Why not mention the state? Or why not mention where someone lives in terms of the county and so on? But alas, I wish that they had mentioned it here, because that would give you an idea on a local sense what type of Bigfoot it is. That's what I was thinking as well, that it was a creature, big item, in other words, 10 foot tall. What else could be that big and have reddish brownish hair, resemble a human in shape and so on, than your average Bigfoot? But the fact that the user mentioned this other twist got me thinking. They stated towards the end that the uncle was there living with the grandparents, and apparently this thing liked to be right outside the uncle's area, like the uncle's window. But then they mentioned that the uncle was not a good person, and that there's other stories that the user wants to mention. But the fact that the uncle moved away caused this thing to no longer appear makes you wonder how they tie in together. Like, what is it? Is it something else? Is it something more supernatural? Like, was this a manifestation of something bad that the uncle was doing, and then that in turn was there because of him, and then once he was gone, then that was it? There was no longer anything there. The fact that the user mentioned also towards the end that it was years later, that nothing else really occurred afterward. It was just pretty much during that same time period that they were there along with their uncle. Then that's simply something that just is too much of a coincidence to ignore. But I just wanted to see what that was, like something else, like instead of it being more cryptid related, could it truly be something on the lines of a supernatural aspect? I wouldn't go so far as saying like it's something like a Wendigo or something along those lines, but who knows? Somebody might have to post. Do you know if there's any creature out there that manifests itself based on someone's evilness? And if so, if it resembles like a Bigfoot or some other type of creature, what could it be? Post it in the comments. I'd love to hear what that is as well too. But that's pretty much it. That's everything associated with these very unique encounters. Nothing really bad happened to the user, but still, it's definitely something that made an impression on them, a scary one, considering this thing was almost trolling them and stalking them at the same time. All right, everybody. Thanks again as always. Take care. Bye.